though do you find that most Western Christians don't see that you wish they could see?
I wish they could see how authentic Christian faith is around the world, even when it doesn't look like your Christian faith. That is still the major hurdle of being a global Christianity scholar. Is there still this work to be done of convincing Western Christians that other expressions of Christianity are just as legitimate as yours, that other interpretations of scripture are just as legitimate as yours, that other ideas of gender roles are just as legitimate as yours. We're still at the level of legitimacy, which is too bad, because I feel like we should be much further along in this conversation, because the shift of Christianity to the global South didn't just happen yesterday. This has been a long time coming. And if we've been paying close attention, we should have the legitimacy question checked off and moved on to the mutual understanding conversation, the dialogue conversation, the work together conversation, the mutual witness conversation. But to me, we're still at legitimacy of people asking, well, is that kind of Christianity real? Let me give you an example I just heard the other day. So in Uzbekistan, which is a Muslim majority country, Christians there recently became large enough that the government allowed them to build a church building. Great. So the Uzbek Christians are building or have these plans to build a church, and a German church finds out about these plans and wants to partner with the Uzbeks and help fundraise and give money to build this new Uzbek church. So Germans come and the Uzbeks show them the plan for the church, and the Germans are like, that's a mosque. And the Uzbek Christians are like, no, it's a church in Uzbek style. And the Germans look at it again and say, it's a mosque. And the Christians say, no, it's a church in Uzbek style. It's a church that makes cultural sense for us. And the Germans pulled out because they didn't want to be a part of a church that they thought looked like a mosque. But it's not up to the Germans what kind of church the Uzbek Christians build. It's up to the Uzbeks to decide what kind of church the Uzbeks build. There's all kinds of social and historical and cultural reasons why that Uzbek church that they designed themselves would look the way it looks. And that's the level of legitimacy that we're still working at. Christians should be able to build whatever kind of church looks right and feels right to them. They should be able to speak and worship in whatever language and whatever musical style, wearing whatever clothes makes sense for them, without any Westerner telling them it's right or wrong. That's where we're at, and that's what I want people to know.
Where is Christianity growing the most, by the way? The most exciting developments that you've seen and that inspires you? I mean, we can talk about the obstacles and then get really frustrated and get our and we should, I mean, frankly. But sometimes I need to have a positive example to look at.
Sure.
To get some joy.
Yeah.
Where do you find joy in global Christianity right now?
I find joy in the places where Christianity is getting to the place where indigenous Christians are saying, thank you to all the people who helped us become Christian. We're going to take it from here and we're going to figure out how to be Christian on our own terms. So an example of this is Mongolia. The church in Mongolia is really young, only since the post-Soviet era in the early 1990s. There was, I think, 4 known Christians in 1991, 4 in the whole country. That's a very small number.
1991?
Yes, in our lifetimes, right? That's astounding. And the church has grown dramatically. Now there's like 60,000 Christians in Mongolia. And now they're getting to the point where they're saying, okay, we don't want to be Christian the way the Koreans are telling us to be Christian. There are lots of Korean missionaries in Mongolia. We don't want to be Christian the way the Americans are telling us to be Christian. A lot of Americans in Mongolia. We want to be Christian in Mongolian ways. And it's like the 1st century church over there as a result, right? This is the stuff of the New Testament of figuring out how to be Gentile and Christian, how to be Jewish and Christian, how to be Mongolian and Christian, how to be Nepalese and Christian, how to be Cambodian and Christian. So there's places in the world where these conversations are happening, and that is where I find joy in world Christianity. It's that indigenous initiative to say, we love and respect all of you who have helped us, but please let us figure this out on our own, in our own way. And as long as people say, okay, good, do it. And if you need help, we're here for you. But that initiative, that indigenous initiative, that's the stuff of world Christianity that I get excited about.
Well, where do you find that at? Like, where do you find the biggest indigenous Christian movements right now where it's exploding?
So India is a big place for this, where we have movements or Hindu background believer movements, as they're called, where people are doing a lot of experimenting about what it means to be Indian and Christian. And there's a huge spectrum of theology that goes along with that, from people building Western style churches all the way to Christian movements within Hinduism, where people publicly retain their Hindu identity, but privately they are Christ followers. So on that spectrum, you see all kinds of things. And there's movements in India, and Bangladesh is a pretty significant place for these kinds of movements. But again, there's these legitimacy questions that are happening because a lot of Westerners don't like it. But it's not up to the West for Indians to decide how they're going to be Christian. It's up to Indians how they're going to be Christian.
When you say that, what do you mean by that? Flesh that out for us just for a moment, because you've alluded to that a few times. The legitimacy, Western Christians determine whether or not it's legitimate. What are the criteria that you find that most Westerners employ when they look to determine whether legitimacy happens in these indigenous cultures?
Yeah, I think there's a few things. So they're looking for what they understand to be quote unquote orthodox theology. They're looking for the centrality of scripture. Is what are the decisions you're making for how your church is going to look or how your movement's going to look? Are they biblically based or are they culturally based? And that's where part of the rub is, because Westerners try to differentiate religion and culture. But that's not how it works in most of the world. Religion and culture are so intricately bound. What is Hindu and what is Indian, right? What is, and you can apply that to all kinds of places, right? What is shamanistic and what is Mongolian? It's almost impossible to tell, right? But then there's also other things that some Western organizations look for, such as if a particular movement is led by women, they don't consider it a movement. Or if a house church is led by a woman, they don't consider it a real church. It has to be led by a man in order for it to be considered a church. That is very problematic because many of these movements are led by women, because generally women are more likely than men to convert to Christianity. So that gender dynamic is a really big piece of this.